my favorite book of all time was one that I read almost 2 years ago. I got it off of eBay for like $4.99, and my entire copy has writing in it because it was used by someone. Well, I'm not going to put their name, show their name, but it was used by someone in a high school class. I'm assuming someone had to read this in high school. So, but this is my favorite book. It is, in my opinion, the great American novel. It is John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Is my favorite book, what I think is the greatest book of all time. So if you're not familiar with what this is, I'm sure everyone's already heard about this. Everyone knows about the book that is John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Not everybody knows what it's about. So there's in the 1930s, everyone knows there was the Great Depression, but not everybody knows that there was an event called the Dust Bowl. In the Dust Bowl, farmers used different farming methods that eventually made the soil vulnerable to being eroded away through wind erosion. The wind came in mainly in the Great Plains. Think about Nebraska, Oklahoma, Missouri. I guess, Missouri would be the Great Plains. Anyways, forget. Yeah. So it's called the Dust Bowl because lots of dust was swirled around. Farming became impossible. So a lot of these families that lived back then leased their plot of land. So the land that they were living on was passed down generation to generation. However, they didn't own the land. It was owned by the bank. So when they couldn't grow their crops, they couldn't sell their crops, they couldn't pay the lease on the land, they couldn't pay their rent to the land. The companies came in, they bulldozed their houses, their farms, and they forced the families off the land. And so what did they decide to do? Well, a lot of them decided to move west to California. All right, so this is what this book deals with, The Grapes of Wrath. It is kind of a historical fiction that tells the story of the GBOAT family and their experience living through the Dust Bowl and what they did when they left and what they found when they got to California, the things that happened to them. It can be sad at some times. The ending is amazing, but it's very sad. And the interesting thing about this book as well is that the chapters switch between different narrative styles. So you have the main narrative that's going on, the story, but then there are interludes. So every other chapter, John Steinbeck will kind of give a little social commentary. So let me try to find an example of this. So you'll have for example, I'm looking at chapter 4 right now. You'll have Tom's a great one, Cassie agreed. They plodded dustily on down to the bottom of the draw and then slowed their steps for the rise. That's the story. You go to chapter 5 in the book, and you get more of, poetic waxing, waning, I don't know, about poetic writing about John Steinbeck's, basically social commentary. So if you go to chapter 5, he says, the owners of the land came onto the land, or more often a spokesman of the owners came. They came in closed cars and they felt the dry earth with their fingers, and sometimes they drove big earth augers into the ground for soil tests. The tenants from their sun-beaten dooryards watched uneasily when the closed cars drove along the fields. At last the owner men drove into the dooryards and sat in their cars to talk out the windows. Tenant men stood beside the cars for a while, and you get the point. So it kind of has this interlude that is more of a social commentary. So it's very, very interesting. The thing I like about this book as well is that it's, as Americans, we all come from somewhere, right? Our ancestors come from some other place. For me, I have Irish immigrants on one side of the family and Mexican immigrants on another side of the family. And this book, even though it's people from Oklahoma moving to California, it still carries the themes of someone moving to a new place and being discriminated against for where they come from. Right now in popular media, if you go to I'm from Florida. If you go to any beachside town in Florida, you'll see shirts that say, keep your New York out of my Florida. Right now I live in Utah, and if you go to any gift shop, they will say, don't move to Utah, stay out of Utah. They're referring to the Californians. All Californians have ruined Utah, Wyoming, etc., etc. So, this is a recurring theme all the time. I mean, obviously, the national news, immigration has become something everyone's talking about. And this book has that theme of people moving to a new place and trying to fit in, trying to build a new life, which is something that resonates with me, probably resonates with a lot of other people. And not even if, your immediate family members are immigrants, but if you yourself have moved from one part of the country to another, this is a great book to read. Feel, universal, to feel like it's a universal thing, that everybody goes through this, and it's not just you. Which is why I love this book. John Steinbeck's writing is amazing, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to criticize the guy's writing. He's amazing. That's why it's my favorite book of all time. I encourage everyone else to read it. You can find it on eBay, $3.99. There you go. All right, John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. Go read it now. That is my favorite book of all time.